Here is Ulysses Lavaroni for Cyclical Dreams Records, and it's a pleasure to meet and to be with Christian Fiesel, a very interesting musician from Deutschland. And we are very happy. We are very happy to have in our label, and we are going to make a brief interview and know about a bit more about him. And so it's a pleasure to be with you, Christian.
Hi, Ulysses. Nice to meet
Welcome.
you.
Well, we want to know a bit about you. Your Follow Me South recording on Cyclical Dreams is a very interesting release that is going to be very soon. So, what is your approach to music? How do you reach electronic music? How do you get this electronic music work?
Okay. I think it's quite fair to say that electronic music is probably one of my very first and most impressive takeaways from my youth. I started with electronic music, or my interest in electronic music started with Kraftwerk in the mid-70s. My father brought two albums from Kraftwerk with him. One was Autobahn, and the second one was Radioactivity. And especially Autobahn impressed me so deeply that it really changes my mind completely. And I can honestly say my first ever bought record was a Man Machine from Kraftwerk. And it's fair to say that from this moment on, I was really hooked on electronic music. It took another, let's say, 4 or 5 years till I really managed to go to electronic music in terms of creating one. Because when it was in the early 80s, when I was 16, synthesizers were still enormously expensive. So my first synthesizer was like, with the most guys, was an Korg MS-20 or MS-10. I already forgot. And then I really started to experiment with radio signals, with Moog sounds, not Moog sounds, Korg sounds, and some voice and noise recordings, like a lot of other people do. And then over the time, I went to other bands to create music them with other guys, to have more influences, which ended up me playing guitar in a band instead of playing keyboards. So this went on for, let's say, another 5 years. And after a while, I met a guy who had the idea to create a studio in Hamburg, where I came from, because now I live in Trittau, and Hamburg is probably the biggest city in the north of Germany. And then we created a studio, which gave me the first time the real opportunity to create my own music without any other help, as I got a lot of synthesizers which were bought with the studio, and I got a lot of equipment with them. And then I started to create soundscapes with noises and try to do my first steps with electronic music. And this went on for quite a long time. And I never really managed to go any nearer to Kraftwerk than I was now, because Kraftwerk is all about reduction. And I always, as I said, my personality is not about reduction. My personality is overflowing with emotions, with ideas. So the first step that I took is making noises into music. And this went on, let's say, in the early 2000s. And with the not invention, but with the spreading of internet, I really found a way to get in touch with labels who I offered my soundscapes, and they were interested. It was only a very few recordings and only very few people interested. But the longer I worked, the more I got into synthesizers and real electronic music as we understand now. My aim was always being expressing myself, having soundscapes expressing my personality, having sounds as music. And this changes over time. And then I started making music sounds. And this was something very complex in my mind, and it ended up making me some very atmospheric, very cinematic music. I always considered my albums as a kind of audiobook. I think this is the best way to say. So when we talk about Follow Me South, this is like a musical audiobook. I tell a story with sounds, with music. And I got a Memotron, which is a modern version of a Mellotron, which completely changes my music, which brought me far closer to the Berlin School in terms of sound. And this gave me some very particular sounds that make me capable of recreating the atmosphere that I had in mind. And my vision is always those dark, cinematic, horror style, alien style soundscapes, soundtrack music. And the Follow Me South, I think, is the most important, I think, and the best thing that I got so far, because this is an album full of dense and very deep music that I try to create to show off how do we develop as a human. We come from somewhere and we go to somewhere, and this is a long journey with a lot of stations in between. And this was all the idea about Follow Me South. And it was quite a long way from strumming some guitars with a school band to going to a Mellotron and having a choir singing for you. And I have to say, and I hope I can finish with this, that the most interesting noise I found so far is the voice. And the most interesting noise I ever found is all kinds of noises that human voices can create. And this is probably the most important thing about my current music, and this is the most important thing about Follow Me South. This is the voice of the human being brought onto a CD or brought on an album.
Amazing. It's an impressive description of your work, and I agree. I listen to work, and the images are coming all the time. It's full of images, and it's I like this audiobook way of explain. It's a really a story. Well, and your workflow, how do you compose? Maybe there's something that you refer before, but how is your workflow? You start improvising, you have the idea, you go and search the notes, and then how is the way that you work musically?
I think I have several processes which might bring several music styles. Normally, very often I improvise like most of us. I just select any boring sound and play around, have some melody and say, oh, this sounds nice. Let's record it. And then I build up from there. Another one is I go through archives and find a sound. And I really mean a sound, a noise. Something I said, this is really interesting. And then I keep it growing on me. I listen to it and I keep it looping. And then I said, this starts to sound like music. And when I got to a specific point, I treat this material till it's no longer recognizable. And this might be the base of creating something very new, like having a hammer falling. Or I got one track which is simply starting with a noise that my heating does here in the house. It's kind of hissy, noisy stuff, and you hear the water pumping through the radiator, and then I recorded it and I threaded, and then something musically coming from this, and then I start to add little sound bits where it's suiting. This is the second way. So first is improvising. Second is getting inspired by noises. And I think the most common is that you have a sound, and this time I really mean a synthesizer sound, a Memotron sound, a human sound, and then I say, okay, this is something that really catches my ear, and what can I do with this particular sound? And then I try to abstract what's the essence of the sound, what's the meaning of the sound. You know, like having, if you talk to me and I said, and I forget about all the meaning that of the things you say, I simply reduce your voice to the acoustic contents, and then I really try to tweak around till I found the pound, find the pound, excuse me, where the sound and the melody, or the sound and the chords, I get together. So I got 3 ways, and the results may vary very much. And my problem is often that I start with one method, then I get to another method, and in the end, everything falls together and says it sounds perfect, like it did with Follow Me South. But I have different experiences where nothing comes together and I said, this is rubbish. You know, the starting material was good, the idea this was good, but it doesn't fit together. And then I put it on the archive, and then I let it grow on me. And this is the 4th method: simply throw everything away, keep it somewhere in the dustbin, but forget for now, and then you take it back, and then you see it in a different light. And this is the 4th approach, that like having a good wine in the cellar, and then say, okay, now it's the time to open up. And then all of a sudden, something very interesting is coming from this. And I don't have any particular instrument. I would say it's my favorite one besides the Mellotron. I think since 2014, 2015, I can't remember exactly, the Memotron is probably the most dominant instrument. Not for all of my recordings, but Memotron or Mellotron is the key instrument on Follow Me South for a very good reason. I think I mentioned it's the voice samples that are really strong, and they have this very specific feeling, this human voice feeling. If I would be capable of having a real human choir recorder, I probably would consider to use this instead of a Memotron. But as in times of Corona, this is no option at all. So I think the idea is having humanizing the sounds and dehumanizing humanity, so that everything in the end is serving a special purpose, which brings my personality to shine. I hope this wasn't too long, but you know, it's a very complex thing, and I think there are probably quite a lot of musicians who have a very precise idea how they create things. But for me, it always depends on my mood and what I want to achieve. But one last thing: sometimes you really have an idea where you want to go. You know, it's like a flow. Follow Me South is a very good example for I had an idea and I followed it through. I had other albums where I have 2 pieces that sound Berlin School. I have 2 pieces that sound dark ambient. I have 2 pieces that sound like cluster, and nothing goes together. And you say all pieces are nice, but nothing comes together because everything's improvised, everything's coming out of the moment. And then I have those very rare but lucky situations like Follow Me South, which are really, everything comes together, and it's a concept I can really follow through always through. And I think this is the glorious moments I really try to make music for. This one moment you say, this is not perfect, but this is really the way it was intended. Because I really have to admit, I never care for perfection. I always care for the emotion.
Brilliant. There's a lot of observation in your music. There's a lot of achieving the essence of the things. And this is really great. And I think this is maybe a key for the deep atmosphere that it's in your work. It's because there's a deepness in the observation, and it can be achieved in your work for sure. And okay, about your vision on electronic music nowadays. We are a very special, we can say, moment, because there's a lot of gear going round, there's a lot of opportunities going round, there's a lot of labels and things
Yeah.
going round, and there's a lot of contradictions going round. So what is your impression, what is your vision about electronic music in this present era? And
I think, yep,
in a
absolutely.
brief version,
In the future,
if you please.
I think Berlin school has gotten old, but it's still young enough at heart that it will survive even those crises that appear once in a while. But we as an elder generation, we have to admit the fresh sounds won't come from us. The fresh sounds come from the youth. And it's a good feeling to have some very talented new faces, new names that come up into the market. And I'm not scared that electronic music will die out anytime soon. Sorry, I tried to cut it short because I know I can, you know, this topic is something I can talk about for hours and it
Yes,
won't
I
take
know.
good any.
We can, but it was too brilliant. Anyway, okay, Christian, we are. It's a very pleasure for us to have your work in the label, and I hope we can release other works of you and keep in contact all the time. And many thanks for this valuable interview.
Yeah, I have to think it was really an honor talking with you. I really enjoyed our time. It was really great. And thanks for the perfect cover artwork we chose. This is really a brilliant photo. Thank you so much. And it was really a nice conversation. I hope we can repeat this sometime soon because it was really nice talking with you. And really thumbs up for your label. And I hope things keep going as good as they seem to go now. Because COVID probably is not only a bad thing, it can be a good thing even for a new label like yours, because people are now tend to look for new stuff to keep them going while they're stuck at home.